Well, I really appreciate Kraemer asking me to speak. And I was in the class of, I think I was 41. And I remember Advocacy Day. And I guess I'd been at the county for a couple of years there. So hopefully I will be able to provide some helpful information and really look forward to discussion as well. So I am currently the aide to Supervisor Katie Rice. So Katie is currently the president of the Board of Supervisors, and they rotate every 4 years. So when you're with the president's office, you not only get issues coming from your district, but you also get the broader issues as well, since you're the president's office. I've been working with her for about 8 years. And I would say that I spend a large majority of my time on public health, traffic congestion, and environmental issues. And our district is District 2. And this will become more relevant when we have our discussion about advocacy, because primarily the advocacy that comes to your office, it's usually the folks in your district. Start with the supervisor in their area. So Katie is the Ross Valley. So our district is from Fairfax, San Anselmo, Ross, parts of Larkspur, parts of San Rafael, and Kimfield and Greenbrae. So those are the folks that we hear from the most when it comes to advocacy. But again, we do have people approach us for larger issues as well. Just a little bit about myself. Kraemer asked me to tell you a little bit about myself, and also what she said about anyone can be an advocate. So I actually spent 20 years in sales and marketing in Nashville, Chicago, and in San Francisco. And so came fairly late to the world of government and the world of advocacy that we're talking about. I had gotten more involved in my community and had actually run some campaigns for the school district. And somebody had put a bug in Katie's ear that I might want to run her first campaign. And so that's where we first met. And then after that experience, she asked me to work for her, and that's how it happened. It's not anything I ever envisioned. For me, it was a wonderful opportunity because it was a real extension of the work I had done in the community before, through the school foundation, through some nonprofits and boards that I had been on, and also using some of my advertising skills. So I kind of had a zigzag path to get here. When preparing for this discussion, I swim in the mornings, and I was actually thinking about this morning. And gosh, I mean, I come across advocacy multiple times a day in my job. I probably talked to 2 or 3 people this morning that had something that they wanted to advocate for. And on the Board of Supervisors meeting that's going on right now, it's a special meeting to hear about the Home Key program, which is grants to buy, that the county has the opportunity to buy hotels to house the homeless, to make them not homeless. Oh, sorry, I'm on the motion sensor. Sorry. You guys can see me in the dark. And so I was listening to that meeting, and those proposed hotels to be purchased to house the homeless, to not be homeless anymore, are Mill Valley, Corte Madera, and Novato. Corte Madera, Mill Valley, and San Rafael, sorry. Corte Madera, San Rafael, and Novato. And so there are many, many people calling in to talk about their concerns about having these hotels in their neighborhood. And then there are also people calling in, primarily from MOC, Marin Organizing Committee, from the faith-based group, to advocate for the county moving ahead with purchasing these facilities. So that's just a perfect example of one type of advocacy that's going to go on. I don't know where it's going to end up today, and I think the decision is not today, but maybe next week, because you're certainly hearing from both sides. In my own life, I have 2 things that I would say are in the advocacy realm right now, and then I'll flip over to advocacy tips. One thing is something called Marin 9 to 25. It is an idea, a concept, where to have an umbrella infrastructure over all children's services, so that we have equity among our youth and they can all access mental health, physical health, school activities, etc. And that was an idea that was born out of several meetings with the probation department, myself representing Katie's office, and also Health and Human Services. And so we have gotten a little bit of funding, and we are working with a consultant that's helping us pull together this concept of a collective impact. And we are literally going to organization to organization to organization that provides you services to explain this idea, to get support, so that we can continue to grow, form a steering committee, and hopefully make it a reality in the community. As well, we're also talking to potential funders. So again, it's that step by step approach that's a little different from kind of going to your city council or whatever, but it is the same strategy. My other personal form of advocacy is I'm a CASA, which is a court-appointed special advocate, which is again a different definition of advocate than we're kind of talking about today. But that's when you are appointed by the court to be a special support for a kid in the court system. And these are either kids that are foster youth, or also kids in the probation system. And I have a particular love for kids in the probation system. So I get matched with one of them, and then I work with them, seeing them every week, providing everything from educational support to teaching how to swim to whatever it is that that child needs to help them have a full life and get through their experience with the court. And those journeys usually last 2 to 3 years. So that's just a couple definitions of me and my personal advocacy right now. And they both take on different forms, but both are types of advocacy. So when I was thinking about what we were going to talk about today, I kind of broke it down in 3 chunks. The first one is, what is good advocacy? And there's no formula, but there's certainly basic tenets that are going to make your message be heard more than others, I believe. And this is, remember, I am the aide, and I am in very close contact with my supervisor. And I actually did talk to Katie before I came and kind of got her sense, because I felt like I knew what the best ways were for people to advocate to me to get to her, but I also wanted to hear from her what she felt was the best way for folks to advocate. So I'm going to highlight and star for you a few of those that we both were really high on the list. So when we talk about what's good advocacy, the first important thing, I think, both for me and for Katie, me as kind of the pass-through, is know your facts as much as you can. And when we at Board of Supervisors meetings and other places, there are a lot of impassioned people, and impassioned is great to have passion for your cause, but it goes really, really far if you have studied the issue and can understand the context as much as possible. That means doing a little bit of homework. Again, it's a two-way street. And sometimes the issues are really, really complex. Some that come to mind that have just been hot buttons here at the community that have been discussed quite a bit are SB 54, and that's the police contact with ICE, the sanctuary city issues, Ross Valley flood, particularly in my district, but they're very, very complex issues. And so the more you can understand the facts and know what those obstacles are, the better your comments are going to be to whoever you're advocating for. And one thing that I'd like to say as an aide is that we are here to support the community. So if you are working on an issue and you have questions or concerns, you can always call us. I mean, you don't have to be 100% up on everything to call a supervisor's office, right? You can also call us and say, how do I find out more about this? Or where can I go? Or who else in the county can I talk to? What person in the planning department would be the best? And our job really is to connect you with that information, whether we give it to you, whether we hand it to you, we tell you, or we connect you with someone else. And I think that's super important, and it's a good way to use our offices. The other thing is, it's helpful if you can offer a solution or an alternative and not just say no. So if there's something on the table where you're against it, which is absolutely fine, maybe you can throw in what else should be explored or what else should be looked at. And some of that was happening in the meeting this morning for the people that were calling in about home key and concerned about the hotel or the inn in Novato. Some people were offering alternatives or what they thought were alternatives, like, can we slow this down? Can we go through this process? Can we do this and that? Versus just an absolutely no, because understanding that usually there's 2 sides or 3 sides or 4 sides or 5 sides of every issue. So that's another one. Those were on Katie's list too. Those two, right? Those, they know the facts, do your homework, and try to offer a solution versus just saying no. Be respectful and not combative. I don't think that this would have been something that might have come to the forefront when I started working about 6 or 7 years, but I think that over time, we have seen a type of advocacy that can be more combative than respectful. I think you can speak strongly and get your point across in a very strong way without being combative. But I think through the Zoom as well and some of the online platforms, we have seen more of that combative behavior. And also it took the county a while to figure out the whole Zoom thing. So sometimes people weren't on camera, sometimes they were. But I think it's just the old idea of being respectful and be strong, and you can be stalwart-worthy, but be respectful of the other person and try to put yourself in the shoes. Another point when Lorenzo and I were talking is, remember that whoever you're advocating to, especially if it's an elected, like a board of supervisors, because that's my lens, they have a myriad of issues that they're thinking about. So while you're impassioned about your issue, they may have 3 other issues way at top on their list that have deadlines or key decisions, and it might not be the time for your issue to move, but you're always planting seeds. And I loved that the poll question about how did you feel after you spoke in public comment. And I used to give a lot of public comment as the chair of a foundation for a school district to the school board. And I think my question to that poll was like, I'm not always sure I made a difference, but do know that you do make a difference. It just may not be the time that something's going to move forward. But I just think of it as seed planting, as much as you can, it's seed planting. And Kraemer knows this with the work that she's done with the IPM Commission and others that especially the whole pesticide world, but it's a very rare that you would move any issue forward without seed planting. And sometimes seed planting can take a couple of years. I never worked in the public sector until I worked for the county, and I was amazed at how long things took, because when you're in the private sector, you just stay at the office until it gets done. And so it is a process, and that is a positive thing. In that one reason the process takes so long is because the public is included and heard from in these issues, but it does require an incredible amount of patience. Another thing that we talked about is be collaborative. So I'm going to give you an example, and we'll get to examples later, but this one sticks in my mind. So for the rental eviction moratorium, you guys are probably familiar with, where people don't have to pay their rent during COVID if they have certain paperwork that they can give to their landlord. That has gotten extended several times throughout the pandemic, and now it's covered by the state through, I think, the end of January. So we had many, many people come, and many organizations, and advocate for the rental eviction moratorium. I had a couple of people that were really trying to push a moratorium against rent increase. And that's also a really good, valid issue, right? It's like, I'm in an apartment and I'm barely making it, and we're in a pandemic, and my landlord is going to increase the rent. And so I was hoping, when I was talking to this constituent, I said, can you get other folks, other groups to help you advocate? And that didn't happen. And we actually don't have a rental increase moratorium. I don't know if that would have made a difference, but when people or organizations or groups can come together with a singular mission or project or issue that they want to push ahead, it really makes a big difference, whether it's groups of people coming together, whether it's communities together, whether it's community-based organizations coming together. It can make a big difference to be collaborative. And that also goes for the county. So like the county's not in charge of everything, right? So the county can collaborate sometimes with our cities and towns to lobby the state, right? So the county has to follow that same advice as well. Manage your expectations. I kind of just talked about that. The process may be complicated and take time, and it may not be the best time. Important to apply the equity lens to your calls and request. The county has undergone a 5-year plan, and in that, equity is a big emphasis. And hopefully you guys are aware of also the equity committee that the county's forming out in the community. That application is out there right now, and the deadline is next week. So Kraemer, if anyone in the group is interested in seeing that application, would love to float that out. But just make sure when you're thinking about this, is my proposal harming anybody? Is it for the benefit of the greater good? Are there parts of the community that won't benefit, or parts of the community that are being harmed by this? Or, you know, it's the whole equity lens, which goes beyond race in a variety of ways, but thinking about the cause and effect of what you're suggesting. Understanding what each level of government is able to do. Wow, this is really a big one, because, you know, the county, for people, and you guys are probably much more in the know, but it's really hard for people to understand that the county doesn't tell the sheriff what to do, and the county doesn't tell the school districts what to do. And we certainly have relationships, especially, you know, the supervisors with the sheriff and Mary Jane Burke of the school district, and PG&E, the telecommunications companies. But in some cases, the county does not have jurisdiction. It can either be a city or town that might have the jurisdiction. We get a lot of calls from people that live in San Anselmo or Fairfax that are asking us to help them with a problem, and I can connect them with someone from the government of their city and town, but the county doesn't have that jurisdiction. Again, we have the relationships, and we can help work through issues, but in some cases we can't make the law or the ordinance or the policy or whatever. I'll give you a good example of what's happening right now is with the power shutoff. We get a lot of people calling our office, and the county did work very closely with PG&E when we had that really bad shutoff that was multiple days last year. But, you know, the county doesn't have we don't have control over whose power is shut off and when it is shut off and why it is shut off, right? That is kind of beyond, there goes my, that's beyond kind of our expertise. And so that's just an example of what's come up today. Relationships are important. Sorry, I'm going to stand up and get my light back on. Not coming on. There we go. Relationships are important. And that's where I would suggest, again, using your supervisor. Again, if you're going to your supervisor, or this could be a city or town, but, you know, use your offices. You know, we're friendly folks. We try to be, and we are there every day, every weekday. And our job is to talk to constituents and take care of problems or help them in any way. So we do work on relationship building, and that relationship building can be very helpful when you are interested in getting the ear or finding out more about how you would get your message to a supervisor or someone else at the county. And my last little bullet is more isn't always better. One thing that we saw, and I'll talk a little bit about this with examples, is you guys have all know about the movement to rename Sir Francis Drake, the road, and then also the school renaming, which of course we don't have any jurisdiction over, but it just happened. They were kind of happening at parallel times. But when the Sir Francis Drake issue came up, there was a petition that came our way, and it had, oh, I don't remember at the time, but like 1,000 signatures. The issue with petitions is that we don't know where those people are from, and a lot of times they're from out of county, and so it really kind of loses the. You can't say they're one for one kind of votes or weigh-ins from people in our community. So we really want to know that those comments and concerns are coming from people that live in Marin that are affected by those comments and concerns on both sides. And so when we get these petitions and they start flooding the inbox, flooding, there's no way to look at all those petitions. They're all saying the same thing. So we kind of pull those over in an inbox, and they stay there. But we try to parse out who's from our district and who's from Marin. But there are more effective ways to definitely get your message across. So those were the bullets. I hope that was not too fast or too repetitive. Those were my comments on what is good advocacy, and I was gonna then get pretty flat-footed and go to ways to reach the supervisor. I want to see his
Nancy Lorenzo is here.
Oh, good. Lorenzo,
Yeah.
why don't we stop and hear from Lorenzo?
Yeah.
Sure you guys have heard that from me.
Well, thank you so much to the Environmental Forum for inviting me to be here. And, I always love hearing Nancy speak, because she probably is my favorite, and she knows this. She is my favorite.
Stop it.
And her and I have a very good working relationship.
We do.
Positive working relationship. But for those of you who don't know, I'm Lorenzo Cordova, and I'm the aide to Supervisor Dennis Rodoni. He's District 4 Supervisor on the Marin County Board, and he represents the wonkiest district in Marin County. And I say that, not out of malice, but because it really is wonky. He represents our 11 coastal villages, so from the top of Dillon Beach, right as you're about to reach Sonoma County, down to Muir Beach, the southernmost part of our Marin County coast. Across Mount Tam, he represents a little community in Mill Valley called Homestead Valley. He represents the entire town of Cordova. We have a little piece of the Green Beret Boardwalk, and then you wrap around San Quentin Village, so we represent the prison as well. And then you continue to wrap around the bay to the East Santa Fe portion of the city of Santa Fe. So the Bay Point Spinnaker neighborhood and the Canal neighborhood. And then you jump all the way over to Novato, and he represents 25% of West Novato. So West Novato when you're reaching the agricultural land. So that is District 4. So you can imagine we have every single issue that you can think about in Marin County affects our constituents in some way. I grew up in Marin County. I actually grew up in the Canal neighborhood of Santa Fe, a deep connection to District 4. And when I was invited to speak about advocacy, I was like, I'm not sure I'm the right person to be doing this, because I've accomplished pretty much nothing when compared to someone like Nancy, who's really set her footprint in our community. But the reason that I joined public service was a rather personal reason. When I was in 6th grade at Davidson Middle School, we were instructed to pick a community issue and do a little report on it and present it to our class. And growing up in the Canal, I really didn't have parents who had the ability to lead me through that process. So my teacher suggested that I go to the city of Santa Fe City Hall and try to talk to someone about a local issue in our community. And here I am, a sheepish, 6th grader, like marching my way to Santa Fe City Hall, really eager to talk to someone. And I show up, and granted, I was way younger than I am now back then. And I walk into the building really scared to be there. I didn't really feel like I was welcome. And needless to say, I went over to the clerk's desk and I was like, my name is Lorenzo, and I need to talk to someone about a local issue. And I will always remember how vividly inappropriate she treated me. She made me feel like I was wasting her time and like I did not belong there. She's like, why are you here? Who do you need to talk to? And no one has time for that. And that moment stuck with me up until I made it through high school and then college. And I said, you know what? I want to make it a little bit more welcoming for people that look like me, for people that come from where I come from. And thus my career in public service started. I used to be the previous aide to Assemblymember Mark Levine. I'm sure all of you know it. He represents Marin and Sonoma counties in the California State Assembly. And then I met my current boss at an event that we were doing, and he very methodically offered me a position on his team when he was elected into office. So I have a deep connection to District 4. Education has always been something that I'm very passionate about. And when I think about advocacy, it really started in education. I'm a founding board member of a nonprofit organization called Marin Promise Partnership. It's a collective impact nonprofit that aims to get our 18 school districts in Marin County to talk to one another about the education pipeline and how some students in Marin County are doing extremely well, but on the other side of our county, kids are really falling through the cracks. I used to be a board member of an organization called 10,000 Degrees. It's a college access nonprofit organization in Santa Fe that hopes to bridge a college education to our most marginalized students. I'm also very active in the LGBTQ rights movement. I sit on a steering committee for an organization in San Francisco called the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, where we hope to bridge HIV prevention and care services to marginalized communities, so communities of color. We're doing in San Francisco, where I live, we're doing a really good job of keeping our HIV transmission rates really low. But when you disaggregate the data to our communities of color, you're seeing spikes in HIV. And it has to do with the myriad of different reasons why communities of color are not accessing prevention and care. And that's what we're hoping to try to bridge. As an advocate, I feel like I live in this dual world of working for Dennis, but also having my own personal issues that I care about. And the reason why Nancy and Katie have a really good relationship and me and Dennis have a really good relationship is because our values align. We may not agree on 100% on the things that he may do, but I can at least have a conversation with my boss as to why he does the things that he does. And that partnership is really what makes our office work well. Is he is the elected official. I'm his staff person that's there to support him and help him through this process. But ultimately, he's the one that's getting all the flack when things may not go a certain way that a community may want. So we have a really great working relationship. I too checked in with him. He's like, make sure you let them know to just be nice. Nancy's points were all really key. I think the only thing that I can add and that I will add is I think knowing your facts is probably the most important thing that as an advocate you can do. And I bring up this, I'm sure you all know there's a new Netflix documentary that David Letterman does called Next Guest. And he did one on Barack Obama. He invited former President Barack Obama to speak. And on the topic of alternative facts, he shared a personal anecdote that has stuck with him. And it was a tiff that former GOP senator from New York, Senator Moynihan, had with Senator Cassidy, where they were in a deep disagreement. And Senator Cassidy said, well, that is my opinion. And Senator Moynihan said, sir, you are entitled to your own opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts. And that is so key in advocacy, because you may have your perspective and your point of view that you are trying to convey, but you have to set that in the context of our community. So the one piece of advice that I would give you all is do not get tunnel vision or tunnel focused where you're unwilling to understand what's happening at the peripheral. And that is so important because as supervisors, you have to not only balance the needs of all of you, but you have 20,000 other people who are also advocating for issues that are important to them. So understand what is happening in the community. What are people talking about that may be getting the supervisor's attention right now and that may keep them from advancing some of the policy recommendations that you may want to pursue. Building relationships is also key. Being respectful to staff. You know, I can probably count on two hands the singular most disrespectful conversations I've had from constituents where they ultimately feel like they own us. And I think that's also very important for you all to understand. Yes, you are taxpayers. Yes, you pay a lot of money into our tax system, but entitlement is not going to get you anywhere, especially when dealing with staff who have the direct ear to, you know, an elected official, and that happens at the state level and at the local level. I remember, you know, conversations with Assemblymember Mark Levine about ex-constituent called again, and you know, he or she was, you know, extremely disrespectful. So what are they going to do? They're going to disengage with you in the conversation that you're trying to advance. So remember to be respectful, and that relationships really make it or break it for anything. And we all know this. We have experience in either our past professional or personal lives that we may use as examples. I think managing your expectations is also very, very key. You have to understand what the supervisors have the authority to enact and what they don't have the authority to enact, and understanding those nuances in the differing levels of government that you may be upset that they're not, you know, renaming Sir Francis Drake High School fast enough, but then you realize they have no authority to rename Sir Francis Drake. And then to rename Sir Francis Drake, you're thinking you have to talk to Ross, you have to talk to San Anselmo. It's not just a County of Marin issue. Although sometimes I wish that we had the authority to be as more blanket on some of our policy. The reality is this, that we have to work with other local jurisdictions to do anything that is impactful in our community. And that the supervisors also have relationships with elected officials in those levels of government as well. On the same topic of petitions, because I think Nancy and I have been working closely on this whole renaming of the Sir Francis Drake in Marin County. There was a change.org petition, and granted, I think change.org is great. It gives people an easy way to publicly state that they are in support or they are against an X issue. The problem is this, that we already have a system in place for you to comment. We welcome any email, any phone call, any piece of conversation that you can get through our desk. It becomes a part of public comment. There is already a process in place. And even though it may be an administrative, you know, frankly, hurdle, because we have to make those comments, you know, be a part of our official commenting system. That is the easiest way for people who live in our community to tell us how they feel. The problem with change.org is that while they do have the ability to ask for zip codes, and they do have the ability to say, you know, list where they where you live, the vast majority of people who fill those surveys don't live in our community. And I think that's something that's very key for any elected official, not just supervisors, but you have to be mindful of who are the people that are voting you into office and who are the people that you want to hear directly from. The why working for Dennis is so interesting is because at the end of the day, he goes home. When I was working for Assemblymember Mark Levine, he spent time in Sacramento. He lived in Sacramento. He lives in Sacramento part-time. And if he made a decision, he wasn't going home until, you know, Thursday of that week. Dennis had to drive home to Alima, where his neighbors may be pissed off at him because he did X this or X that. And that's also key to getting an ear at the supervisors, or understanding the context of who is sending him or her that comment. What else can I add for all of you? I feel like Nancy did a really great job of setting it up. The one last piece that I'll leave with you in terms of advocacy, and I say it in the context of this, is the environmental forum of Marin. Marin County has always been a leader in environmentalism. I am an environmentalist. My boss is an environmentalist. I care deeply about our environment. There's actually a really good documentary on Netflix by David Attenborough that you should all see. It talks about the environment and really the decline of where our world is headed. But we often exclude certain communities from environmentalism. And I want all of you to remember that if you just look at the people that are around this conversation, it's very white. And I don't say that, again, out of malice, but I want every single one of you to know that communities of color have always been environmentalists. In fact, some cultures, environmentalism is something that is rooted really deeply in our culture. So remember that. And think about how, when you're advocating for certain environmental issues, that you may be inadvertently or advertently excluding other people out of that conversation. And I'll use this example. And I've seen this happen in Marin County. I'm seeing it right now happening with these negotiations with the Home Key Grant to purchase hotels in Nevada, Corte Madera, and Santa Fe. Environmentalists, and again, I am an environmentalist. Environmentalists in Marin County often use environmentalism as a way to keep people out of our community. And that is something that as a younger generation in Marin County who is struggling to one day come back to my hometown, it is really disheartening to see the county and our staff present this project. Let's build X amount of housing units so that we can make teachers and firefighters and our medical personnel have the ability to live in the town that they serve in. And rather quickly, environmentalists say, no, do not build that affordable housing complex or affordable housing project because of X environmental issue, X environmental issue, and X environmental issue. Unwilling to recognize, and again, back to your tunnel focus, that if we were to keep people from being in their cars for 3 hours a day, that would be a lot better for the environment than the potential of cutting down maybe 15 trees. So remember that. That's something that, again, back to my point about really understanding the context of how you're presenting your advocacy, that sometimes being so in the weeds and things may be disproportionately keeping people out of our community. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud of, Marin, is really the richness in our people, of who we have. And all studies will tell you that diversity makes our community an even better place for all. It raises property values, which I often, as someone who's like a data nerd, I'm like, why are people using property values as something like we're going to threaten? No one's going to diminish your property values by putting up, new apartment buildings. But that's what I want to convey to all of you is you're being really good, and I appreciate that. But there's also other generations in Marin County that also deserve to be in our community, that also want to be a part of this conversation. And I think, to Nancy's earlier point, one of the things that we're seeing with COVID is a younger generation of Marin County residents that are home. Because they can't go back to their college campus, or they were home for several months because their college campus closed down, we're seeing a shift in who is commenting, who is sending recommendations to the supervisors. And I think that is beautiful, because it's about time that our younger people tell the supervisors how to do their job, because we continue to make decisions that are going to affect whether or not they can come back to their home. And I think that is key. The one other thing that I'll tell you, and it really comes from a place that I genuinely care about advocacy, is remember to come from a place of love. a love for the issues that you care about, a love for your community. That is important, especially when you're having conversations with an elected official that you may not necessarily agree with or necessarily respect. And it is absolutely okay to have a conversation with someone that you may not want to ever see ever again after that 30-minute conversation that you're able to get with them. But so long as you're able to have a constructive conversation, a conversation where you get your key points across, that is key. So let me teach you how to do this in a very simple way. I've talked to probably thousands of advocates, and later on we'll talk about some key examples of advocacy projects that have come to fruition in our community. But rather simply, when you're approaching a supervisor, really think about this. So like, what is the issue? What is the issue that you're trying to come across? Okay. So what? Why do I care? Why should me as the elected official or the staff to the elected official should care about this? And thirdly, now what? So to Nancy's earlier point, it is really helpful if you come up with a solution or you have a suggested change in course that a supervisor or any elected official could potentially pursue. So rather simply, what, so what, and now what? And if you can do that within 30 minutes or maybe even less, we would love you because you're basically doing our job, for us. So anyhow, thank you so much for allowing me the space and opportunity to be here with all of you again. I'm very proud of the partnership that I have with Nancy. She really is. When you look at the staff of the supervisors, we all come from very different backgrounds. Some people used to be executives and all these industries, and then you have these newbies like me who this is the beginning of my career, and it's really wonderful and frankly heartening to build relationships with someone like Nancy. And every single supervisor has staff that I respect and that are incredible advocates in their day job and do a phenomenal job at representing and supporting their supervisors. So a huge thank you to you all. And I think now we're going to go into how do you actually get a message into a supervisor office, and I'll let Nancy kick that off.
I just wanted to say we have about 10 minutes left, and I would like to have a little time for Q&A. And so maybe we could interject a question from Leslie Adler. Leslie, do you want to please go ahead and unmute yourself? And or I could read your question. Yeah.
Either way,
Okay,
it's there.
Yeah, I'll just read your question. Personal stories are often very compelling in educating and advocating for change. And by the way, we will be talking about those later in the Environmental Forum year. When those stories are emotional or trigger emotion, how is that perceived by officials in light of the recommendation to avoid strong emotion in presentations? I'd love to hear you talk about this because this addresses the tone issue that we'll be talking about in our next class on framing that's been changed to December. So maybe you both could unmute and talk about that.
And then Lorenzo, who I also adore, will also jump in. I think that there is actually, and this is my personal opinion, but and I think Katie would agree with me, but I do think that personal stories are important. We work a lot in the space of ARC-Safe Marin, which is a community coalition on opioid misuse and abuse. And so when there's advocacy issues going there, we're hearing from people that have lost their children and their partners, and the same for the suicide prevention collaboration, which just formed in the county. So I do think there's a place for personal stories and emotion in presentations. And I would separate that from what we were talking about of the opposite of respect. So kind of the anger and the not a two-way street, kind of like talking at someone and telling what they should be doing. I think that kind of emotion is very different from sharing an emotion. And I think what you're talking about in this question is sharing an emotion and how important that is to you and how much has it affected you and how it feels for you, and to use that as a tool, for lack of a better word, to make your request or to explain why this is so important. So I I'm I think it's a positive. Lorenzo, what do you think?
I think so too. I think one of the things that we've been working really hard at is how do we get the personal stories of people who typically do not show up in our space. And that's something that next year, when Dennis assumes the board presidency, we're going to be offering a couple different more things for our community, translation of our board supervisors meetings, which one of the positives of COVID is that transitioning to Zoom, it's allowed us to really provide a platform that is maybe a bit more accessible for some communities. I think personal stories are extremely important, but to Nancy's point, how you use that personal story, be strategic and methodical about it. Because if you're coming at, in our office and you're yelling at us because something happened, that leaves a bad taste in our mouth. But if you are giving us the opportunity to hear from you, for your having enough courage to share your personal story, I think that's something that is, I consider a privilege. And I know that Dennis would as well. And it's different than, when you're coming out of a place of malice. So please don't be hesitant to ever share your personal story, because that is important for us. And you are our constituent. We care about you. And if this is something that's affecting you at a personal level, please do share it with us.
Thank you. Thank you both for commenting on that. And so Nancy, the last section that you guys were going to cover has to do with how to approach.
We had two sections, and we can talk about this in timing and what we want to do. We have one
Okay.
that's pretty flat-footed about ways to reach the supervisor. What I could do, Kraemer, if that's helpful, is I could just put this in an email, send it to you. This is like the nuts and bolts of like how to reach your supervisor. And that way you can share it with the group. And maybe we spend the rest of our time, which I think is 5, 6, 7 minutes, talking about some examples of advocacy that we've seen that kind of fit some of these different criteria.
That would be great. I think that sounds like a good idea. Lorenzo, does that sound good to you too? Yeah. Okay. Super.
And Lorenzo, why don't you kick off with that wonderful example of the collaboration of the Wi-Fi network? If that,
absolutely.
yeah, I think
Okay, so March 16th, we started our shelter in place. School shut down, industry shut down, and we sent 3,000 of Santa Fe City Schools children home. And we expected them, for some reason, to be able to transition to these online learning platforms rather smoothly. But within a week's time frame of that happening, we got wind that students in our Canal neighborhood did not have access to reliable, fast internet. And holy moly, like, what are we going to do? Because these students need to do their schooling. So we quickly got together a group of, and a lot of these advocates who work for our community-based organizations, our schools were also advocating for their government to step in and support our students in the Canal. So a group of key stakeholders got together, myself included, our chief assistant director of our IST department, Javier Trujillo, and the city of Santa Fe, got together and said, realistically, what can we do? What can we do to help our students in the Canal neighborhood who right now don't have internet? So what we did is we designed a mesh Wi-Fi system that would provide internet for our students in the Canal neighborhood. And then we went into fundraising mode. And this is really where Dennis stepped in, and he was able to secure 2 very large donations from generous individuals in our community. And then we did a little bit of fundraising through, MCF and the county, and we were able to get that project funded. So as of right now, there's a mesh Wi-Fi system in the Canal neighborhood. It's called Canal Wi-Fi. If you go to canal-wifi.com, you can look at the portal, and it it is providing internet for all of our students in the neighborhood. So Santa Fe City Schools has provided a laptop to every single student in the neighborhood, and our network is already connected to that laptop. We also, because we were so good in fundraising, is we bought stronger equipment that allowed us to develop a supplementary network that is open to the community. So similar to how you experience internet in a hotel or an airport, if you're in the neighborhood and you need internet, or you just don't want to use your internet, you can tap into the Canal Wi-Fi network, and you'll, as long as you agree to our terms and agreement, you can use the Wi-Fi. That is a great example of advocacy. We had, again, advocates telling us, here's the issue, how are you going to fix it? And then we collaborated with the city of Santa Fe and a local nonprofit. I'm sure you all know Canal Alliance, who's a highly respected nonprofit in the community. And then we kind of put our thinking caps together of how do we fix this? So that's something that is in place. Students now have access to that internet. We are continuously releasing new networks as we build infrastructure. But again, advocacy, collaboration, and then just eliminating our barriers to get it done, because we needed to make sure that our students have access to internet. And that is a project that is actually building the foundation for a larger digital literacy project in the neighborhood. So that's just the foundation. Nancy, do you want to talk about, there's so many examples. I'm just wondering.
We have
about 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
3 minutes. I'm going to mention 2, and I won't go into too much depth. But we talked about the Sir Francis Drake renaming issue, and that is an example of advocacy on both sides, right? And as Lorenzo had noted, because we're on Zoom now, we have a lot of young constituents, and I have to say, in this issue, which isn't yet decided on what's going to happen there, the younger generation, this is a really blanket statement, is yes, change the name, and older generation, no. And so, but what seeds were planted and what process got started from advocacy coming on both sides is that the supervisors who are in the jurisdiction, who oversee where Sir Francis Drake runs through their district, which happen to be Dennis and Katie, have formed a working group of electeds from each jurisdiction, Fairfax, San Anselmo, Ross, and Larkspur, who have been meeting with the county and our equity officer over the past 3 or 4 months to talk about what a process would be and how we should move forward. And in addition to that, there's been an education forum that focused on the history of the Miwok, as well as the historiograph, I think it's what it's called, of Sir Francis Drake, as well as a public listening session. So that is still TBD to figure out where that's going to end up. But because you have this advocacy coming from both sides, change the name, don't change the name, then a process has been put into place to figure out where the community, the county, and those other 4 jurisdictions are going to go with that. And just so you know, so you can keep your eye on it, it could be that 2 of those or 3 of those jurisdictions decide to change the name, and 1 of those jurisdictions doesn't. And they don't have to change the name. You could be driving down Sir Francis Drake, and then it could be called Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then you could go to another jurisdiction and it could be called literally something else, or Sir Francis Drake. So that's going to be a really interesting process that will be public, and there will be discussions at each of those communities on where that's going. So that's going to be interesting, TBD. And then another one really quickly I'll mention is, because it's on my mind, because we're running a campaign this week, but in 2017, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a party bus in the parking lot of the ferry building. And the party bus was full of 8th, 9th graders with all kinds of drinks and drugs or whatever. And a parent had rented that party bus, and that party bus was going to be driving to the city and around while those kids basically had a lot of fun. And that started a movement to relook at an ordinance that the county had put in place 2006 called the Social Host Ordinance. The Social Host Ordinance where parents who allow underage drinking can be fined for allowing that to happen in their homes. Because of that party bus incident, that ordinance was enhanced to include controlled substances, marijuana, and also any kind of rentals like a party bus. And the reason I bring that up is because the county worked with community prevention coalitions that work with youth to revise that ordinance, as well as our youth commission with the youth voice and our county council. And so the county passed that ordinance, and then the advocacy that went from that through an organization called Marin Prevention Network is we took that model ordinance and we went to every city and town council to get them to update their social host ordinance. And that is a pretty typical pattern. It's what our fellow Environmental Forum gals did, Sarah and Helene, with the deep green. If you guys remember that infamous story that's on the Environmental Forum website, when they went from city to town to get to advocate for the cities and towns going deep green, and they came to the county too, and they had an excellent track record. And that's what we did with the social host ordinance, and several other ordinances had it start at the county and then advocating city and town to follow the model ordinance. And
Wonderful.
so that's
Well,
usually a pretty successful strategy.
Let
Okay,
me
we're
just
done.
say, okay, well, let me just say thank you. And I mean, we could go on for hours, and we know it. And we know that as we could go on, we could have many more questions, which is really wonderful. So, or we could have questions, which we're not really having time to have hardly any. But
Well, maybe you can share our emails when
we
I
will.
send this to you. Can share our emails with the group, and feel free to reach out.
We promise we will do that along with your contact information for both of you, if that's okay. Because it's been a rich experience. I'd love to summarize it, but I don't want to take the time because we want to give you all a full 5-minute break. Is that right, Leslie? Okay, so we'll start our break at 11. Let's make it 44 to 11:49, and then we come back with Stephanie, who has been, who we're very fortunate to have today. Stephanie Moulton-Peters would like for us to have our video on so that she can see people as they are speaking or as they're listening. And I think it's a great idea, so let's do it. Just to note, if you have to be moving around a lot, feel free to turn off your video. Just to get up and go get something, no problem. But if you have to move around a whole lot, like if I'm doing something like this, you might want to turn off your video because it is distracting to from the speaker. But other than that, great. So, okay. Shannon, that was good. I like those moves. That wasn't distracting. How are you? Good to see you. Okay, shall we, let's see, we've got, yeah, right. Okay, so we are very fortunate to have Stephanie Moulton-Peters with us. And Stephanie has an extensive background in, you have her bio, as you did for Nancy and Lorenzo, but Stephanie has an extensive background in public service and will soon be serving as District 3 Supervisor, taking the place of Katie Rice. I'm sorry, that's not right. Katie Sears, who has since retired. So Stephanie, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it over and go from there.
Great. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Kraemer. And good to see everybody, some familiar faces, and to meet some new people. I also graduated from the Environmental Forum of Marin Masterclass, so I applaud you all for taking it. I want to give a special shout out for people from District 3, including friends in Marin City and also Mill Valley and Sausalito. So I want to build today on the great points that Nancy and Lorenzo made. In fact, they made so many good points that they cut my job right down to size. And I'm actually going to focus on you, the advocate. I have been an advocate as well, starting with issues for families and kids in Mill Valley, safe routes to school, emergency preparedness, sustainability, and most recently, healthy kids and families with regard to drug and alcohol abuse. So I'm all about quality of life and making sure our families get the support they need to have the best life that we can have. So I want to just say you all play a very important role in local government. We need advocates to help us see what's going on the ground in our communities. Now, I've been a city council member in Mill Valley for 12 years, and I like to say I learned the job from the cracks in the sidewalk up, from strolling my kids into working on traffic and bicycle and pedestrian issues, and ultimately into highway and road construction. You all are the experts where you live, and you add a very important dimension to the conversations that we have in local government, and we need you in there. You've gotten some very good pointers from Nancy and Lorenzo on what makes for the most constructive, helpful content to provide supervisors and also your city council members. We do get a lot of requests for assistance, and they kind of come at us from all sides on all different issues. And they've got to be prioritized and worked into the work plan and the system. Generally, some insights for you. Each council and board of soups has a annual planning retreat. And this is where they take all of the issues that have bubbled up over the year or that are ongoing, and they figure out how they're going to get them done, which ones are first, which are second, which ones are urgent, which ones have a little more time. And then the budget setting process is the other one that is really where the rubber hits the road. What gets funded? And that process usually starts internally in the fall, but as early as January of the year, there'll be a planning process. It tends to go public in the spring for public comment. Most of the time, people don't come to the budget meetings because they are kind of dry. But boy, if you can dig into the text and what is being discussed, that's a really great time to leverage your point of view on things and make your case, in addition to when the issues come up during the year. You know, the role that you play is identifying the issues for us, helping us to define the issues and the various ways it plays out in your local community, identifying the potential solutions, as was suggested before. It's always helpful bringing your good ideas along with you. And then that helps the electeds craft policies to address them. I think, you know, an example is the issue of flooding in Marin City. That is an issue that people in the Marin City community raised up very loud and clear, and importantly, and were able to help explain what it's like when the main roads and arteries are flooded and how that impacts the community. They're basically cut off. This is also the case in other Marin communities. We tend to have one or two roads in and out of most of our cities and towns. And so flooding really does play a big role in you know, public safety. But again, it's the details that the community provides that are really helpful. Then when it comes to setting the priorities during the budget and the planning processes, I'll just say decision makers they're balancing a lot of issues, as you heard earlier today. Some issues are urgent and they really need a lot of attention right now. COVID is one of those. Just we threw everything we had at it, and that we need to do that. Same thing with the wildfires. Same thing with the public safety shutoffs. It's just been one thing after another this year. But the job of public government is to keep our people safe. So safety is always going to be the top priority. And the urgent safety issues are always going to be the top of the top priority. Then you've got other things that are ongoing. And those all get worked into the plan. It's a balancing act. We can't do everything at once. And some things take time. You know, capital projects, which is building things, usually have a 2 to 5 year time frame. And it's not just government that takes 2 to 5 years to do this. I worked in private industry, and anytime we tried to build something, it took time to plan it, to get it permitted, to find out who all the players were that we had to consult. And then within 5 years, we built these things. So don't be disheartened if these things have this kind of a timeline. It's not about you, it's how it works. Now, programs and services can be delivered more quickly. And again, local governments have been responding to COVID and turning things around and creating new things very quickly. So these can be done in a matter of months, as you've heard, or a year or two. And so there is a little bit of a difference in some of the requests you make and how quickly they can be answered. I think somebody mentioned today that be cognizant of, doing your homework and finding out who else is playing in this issue area. For instance, flooding in Marin City is the county has a role to play, and Caltrans is a big player because the highway that we need to put another drain pipe under belongs to them. It took a very long time to get their attention to work with the county. That has happened now, in great part because of the advocacy of the community with Terry Green leading the charge. And also, finally, Caltrans decided to show up, and we can't always make that happen much as we'd like to. The good news is they're on board, they're in the game, and things are going to start to move now, which is good. But again, as others have said, some things are out of our control, and we have to advocate. Electeds have to advocate with other agencies. So we're right in there with you trying to push to get things done. So I'll just close because I do want to leave more time for discussion and questions. We need good partners in building good public policy. So again, raise the issues, raise them early rather than late. Help us flesh out the dimensions of the issues. Help us identify who's working on these. Is Berkeley or Alameda County doing something? Is San Francisco or San Mateo? These are counties that we look to that have more resources, frankly, that often are leading the charge. On the other hand, there's times when Marin lead the charge on things. But help us figure out who else is in the game. And then help us by learning the process through Lorenzo's help or Nancy's help. Like, how does it work? When's an issue going to come before the board? How can you be most helpful? And if there are several of you that are going to comment on an issue, I always encourage people, organize your public comment. Don't repeat. Everybody take a different dimension of the issue so you can put out as much information as you can. So the first speaker talks about one point, second speaker talks about another point, third, so you really get the coverage on the issue that you're interested in. And, then I'll just say, read your county supervisor's newsletters, read the IJ, read the city that you live in. If they put out a newsletter, try and keep current of sort of what's on the docket, what's on the agenda, and when is your issue coming up? When are all the other issues coming up that the city has to consider? And that will help make you an informed, constructive advocate. But really, truly, we need your partnership, and we do need you in there with us to help make our world the best it can be. So on that, I'm going to be quiet and really invite your questions and comments to all the speakers. It was a terrific group that was assembled today. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from any of you, or things you're wondering about why things worked the way they did and what happened? And especially maybe from those of you who have felt that you, in our survey that we did earlier, Stephanie, you didn't see this, but some of our participants in this group felt like they had spoken up, but it didn't really make any difference anyway. And that sort of feeling of, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, disillusion isn't the word.
Yeah.
I can't think of the word. Anybody?
Well,
Give me the
there is
yeah, feeling like, what's the point? You
Okay.
know, yeah. Any
So
thoughts on that?
on that one, I would say check where you are in the process. Where did you raise your comments, and how long has this issue been hanging fire? If the elected body has gone through a year-long study process that for whatever reason you didn't know about, and they're just about to take the final recommendations and vote on them, this is probably not a good time to turn things around. If you're getting in on the front end as the issue is starting, or again, there's a study process going on, that's your high leverage point to really have an impact.
Mm.
If you're too late, it's too far down the road unless what you're offering is really urgent and hasn't been addressed. But if you're on the front end, that is when you have the most impact with the comments you make. That's when things are forming, information is being gathered, and more is being sought after. So that's your high leverage time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there a point, speaking of that, is there a time at which it is too late because the wheels are rolling, that we may as well just
Um,
curious? I don't know if it's a fair
well,
question.
well, again, and I think Nancy and Lorenzo offered to be helpful here to help track where they are in the process. And that is where establishing a relationship and just having an ongoing communication can be helpful if you're part of an organization. You know, meet with the supervisor a couple times a year or even quarterly, or with the aide, and kind of, you know, track the process so that you be sure to know where things are.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so the building relationships has been a common theme throughout what our previous speakers talked about and what you're talking about, which sounds key and sounds in concert with what we've heard. Yeah.
Yes, and I would like to add, because I'm a big relationship person, and oftentimes once I know a group or an individual and can keep their issues in mind, there's opportunities to take that and plug it in at the right time. So I'm a big one for having a big plan, but I'm also very opportunistic that sometimes things happen. I think the issue Lorenzo raised about the Wi-Fi system and connectivity in the canal is an issue that we didn't move the needle on earlier, and we had a good emergency in COVID, and that was the opportunity to push that idea forward and make it happen at last. So sometimes we have opportunities and we can just drive a truck through them if we know what the issues are.
Thank you. And I'd like to, I'm looking at the chat, kind of looking and listening. And Michelle, would you, we got Michelle on video now. She was one of our lacking power person who lost her power for a while out in Fairfax. So Michelle, could you unmute, please, and bring up the questions that you mentioned in Amber? I see the question from you guys, and I will address that in the next class. Okay, so
thank you. So I had two different questions that I put in there, and thank you for spending your time with us today. One was, can you speak a little bit about the link and timing of topic areas to the county mission statement, vision, and programs, and then the individual council board member focus for that year? But that's kind of minor. The other question that I posted is, I do a lot of social equity work, and a lot of them are not going to have time to really come in, meet with you a couple of times a year. They don't understand the process that we're going through right now. They don't have the time to really spend on some of the things you're talking about. And so is there any recommendations that you have there? Is there a training program for advocacy or individual groups that you recommend people go to?
Gosh, Michelle, you make a very good point and ask a very good question. So I'm going to make up an answer on the fly and think about it some more, and then get more information to you and to the forum. Again, I think I'm very understanding that people do not have a lot of time. Our lives are taken up with many urgent things. So that even one meeting with an aide, or going to a community meeting and just making your presence known, even one time, gets you on the map. So I think everyone should know that it does get you on the map as someone who cared enough to show up somewhere at some point in time on an issue. Advocacy programs, one of the things I love about the Environmental Forum, and there are many things I love about it, but is this advocacy component. Sometimes you may know the City Chamber of Commerce put on advocacy programs for local businesses. I think one of the things I'd be happy to do with the forum staff is look for where are those opportunities and get that information out to you. Most of them are not one time, so they may not quite fit what you're looking for, but let us see what we can find and get back to you.
Stephanie, with what you said about a meeting, we know we are in the days of COVID now. And so what about phone calls, emails, snail mail? How do those play into all of this?
I think they all count. I know they're all looked at. I think, email works. Sometimes if you don't hear back in a week or so, resend it and just say, hey, I don't know if this got lost in spam or you might have missed it. Give someone another opportunity to look at it again. But email works, phone call, they all work. They're all portals to getting your point of view heard.
How about Leslie, do you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question that you wrote in the chat so carefully?
Okay. Actually, it was kind of quick, but I was just thinking about your comment about jumping in, being late in the process and how to approach it when you are. But I'm thinking of a particular situation right now where the climate action plan is out for unincorporated Marin, and comments are due later this week. And it felt like there wasn't adequate outreach to the West Marin community. There was like barely any participation of West Marin in that process, and getting the cap, seeing it available was also we were given a compressed time, I think, to review it. It's a big document. There's a lot of ins, a lot of outs, So how do you approach that? I mean, we can write a letter, but it just feels very rushed. Like, is the Board of Supervisors, like, how are they involved in that the cap process? Who, aside from submitting a comment saying, hey, we could use some more time and more representation. I don't know. I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I'm wondering if you have any advice for that.
Yeah, Leslie, I'm right with you as a supervisor to be. A lot of these processes are new to me too. And one of the things I'm going to be asking our staff to work on is a better roadmap for all of us. So we know what's the process going to look like for continuing through the cap or what have you. Where are the opportunities for public comment throughout the process? Because there's multiple opportunities, but I almost want to see a timeline with things marked out, made public, so that we all know when's our chance. I feel certain that I didn't feel like there was a lot of opportunity to comment on the cap. My husband happened to see there was a community meeting and I had something else on the calendar, so I didn't go. And like you, I thought, geez, have I lost my opportunity? No, there will be other opportunities further in the process. This is the first tranche. But at the moment, I don't have better information to let you know, but there will be other opportunities with the board. And frankly, I think that's something through your supervisor. Just ask Lorenzo, when are the other opportunities to comment coming up and what's the process look like? And then hopefully in the next year or so, we'll have some roadmaps out there for everybody.
Also in the chat, Tamala posted a couple of links for more information on that. So that'll be helpful. We'll capture the chat at the end and make that available to you if you want. And Marty, I apologize. Leslie caught it. You had a question way back several minutes ago. Do you want to unmute and ask that, please?
Yeah, I think, well, it was kind of related to Leslie's question. It seems like we're in this cycle of unending crises. And I know, for example, the ordinance that was at some point in the process with the Board of Supervisors on takeout containers was put on hold. And I'm just wondering, like, how is the Board of Supervisors, it doesn't seem like the most opportune time right now to bring sort of the long-term environmental projects to the board. And I'm just wondering how you all seem to be really overloaded with dealing with crises. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of prioritizing, I understand we have to prioritize the things that are urgent, but how is the Board of Supervisors going to get back to a process where we can start to engage some of the more long-term environmental solutions, which our county has always been a leader in?
Right.
Could I mention something here too? We still have, I didn't know we still had Lorenzo and Nancy with us, but could you guys bring up your cameras and maybe weigh in on this as well? And we'll go, we were going to stop this part at, oh no, we're good on time, aren't we? Yeah, yay, okay. So I was thinking then we would, because I know Stephanie, you wanted the questions to be from everyone as well. So yeah, so however you want to go there.
Nancy, do you want to?
Yeah, the question was about the single-use plastic ordinance, right? So, right, and the timing of when is the right time to advocate for that moving forward? Because if you look on our website and our webpage, it's been kind of sitting there for a while. And I'm actually part of that Clean Marin Coalition that got that ordinance started. I would say that I don't know the answer to that, but what I will say on my part is that I will circle back to environmental health and some of the other departments that are involved in it, because we were actually having an internal discussion. Actually, Lorenzo's colleague, Rhonda, in his office that's been working on that, about having people advocate to get that started again, those efforts. But I think what I would like to do first is to go to environmental health and zero waste and see how they are with staffing. We had a lot of staff that were disaster service workers that were pulled off. Most of those have transitioned back in, but there really has been kind of a staffing issue. So I'd like to put that on my plate if that works, to help kind of create what that path for advocacy could be and when.
Yeah.
That work?
And I'll just add to Nancy, in my supervisor training work that I'm doing now, my understanding, Marty, is that both the climate action plan that Leslie mentioned, and then the single-use plastic, and then the stream side ordinance update are the three environmental issues that are on the docket for this coming year.
Right.
So they haven't forgotten, just to give you a little comfort in that, they're not forgotten. COVID just came in and swooped up resources, understandably.
They
And
got
I know,
pretty far on the single-use plastic,
Yeah.
which is good. So
Yeah.
it wasn't at the beginning. And I think that don't quote me, but I think that the big coup in working on that ordinance is that environmental health was agreeing to be the enforcement, like they are for the plastic bag ban, which was huge. And I don't know if that's finalized, but that was a discussion that was happening internally, because that is a big sticking point when we go forward with an ordinance. It's like, well, not that we want to work on enforcement. We're hoping that everyone will just do what they're supposed to do, but which department is going to be watching, right? And helping and adjusting and slapping on the hand gently if people aren't doing what they need to do. And I think that was a big discussion here at the county.
I wanted to also, there was another question about advocating to state officials. And I'm wondering if Lorenzo would want to weigh in on that, since he was in the line of fire on that. Lorenzo, maybe you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to how approaching a Nancy or Lorenzo at the local level. Assemblymember Levine has, several staff for his district who are also available to speak to all of you at any given time. I mean, he also has an email address that you can send. Obviously, you're more than welcome to give him a call as well. But it's the advocacy would be the same as the only difference is he's dealing with the assembly and the state senate and then a governor, and we're dealing with 5 supervisors. But it's rather similar in terms of the processes.
Great, thank you.
About the Marin County Climate Action 2030 plan and the potential of not doing a good enough job of taking into account like a broader outreach. You really hit the nail on the spot. Is we have all these processes, and this is something that I'm sure Supervisor-Elect Stephanie Moulton-Peters will prioritize next year. Is we have these processes in place to try to notify the community as best as we can. And we hear oftentimes that sometimes that communication doesn't get to everyone as efficiently as we think it does. And all I would ask all of you is that in those moments where you feel like you're being kept out of the loop, comment, write us, call us, ask for more information, and insert yourself in that process. And I again apologize if you feel like we've been keeping you out of the loop. But as far as I know, with the Marin County Climate Action Plan, there was a robust community outreach plan that probably was derailed because of COVID. Obviously, we can't have community, meetings. But I know that Dana Armanino, who's our sustainability manager, I know that she was working really hard to make sure that she was getting to all the voices in Marin. So the comments are still open, I believe, for another few days. Let me just go ahead and link it here so that you guys can take a look at where we are. There's a really neat video to accompany the climate action plan.
Thank you, Lorenzo. That's great. Yeah, that's great. And in terms of feeling disenfranchised, that was the word I was looking for. It seems like being in ongoing contact is key. Also, there was a suggestion that Norma made that people get on the CAP committee. How does one go about doing that if one wanted to do that?
Wow.
Do you mean commissions or just like the committees, like a?
I don't know what Norma meant. Norma, are you there? Do you want to?
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Kraemer. I just was saying or thinking that sometimes, usually there is a long public comment period, but our lives are crazy. And if you miss it and that boat sails, you might consider getting on that climate action committee for your town to take a really deep look at it for the next year, and then you can still continue to be involved even though this one decision point may have gotten past you.
Thank you, Norma. And Leslie, our Leslie here, suggested that I address, Amber, your question, because when I was there with you all, I did talk about the idea of theme and repeat, which sounds at odds with what we're hearing from Stephanie, Lorenzo, and Nancy. And it sounds, because they're saying, don't repeat what we've already heard. They're saying, give me something new. And that was also in the written comments that I passed on to you. The difference is, if I have a catchphrase that I can use that won't take a lot of time, but it will encapsulate quickly and be a sticky message, which is what we're going to talk about in December, then that message will start to ring in, what do they call it, an earworm, where you keep hearing it again and again and again. And it starts to, it's kind of like your, I don't like to use the analogy of war, but it's like your battle cry. This is what we're going to do. When we were working on San Rafael implementing an integrated pest management policy, we started out calling it pesticide-free San Rafael, but we realized that's taking away something. So we changed it to safe and healthy San Rafael. And that was our constant theme. We want a safe and healthy San Rafael, safe and healthy San Rafael, safe and healthy. You're welcome to take that one. It's a really, I mean, nobody can argue with it. And we'll get into that more in December, but thank you for asking that, Amber and others. Yeah, Stephanie.
Kraemer, your comment, I like it, a battle cry or a tagline. But I wanted to offer too, it never hurts as an advocate to also comment on what's working. in your communications. If you can point out something that's positive, we're human, just like everybody. We like a little stroke now and then. It kind of opens up the door to, okay, we've got a little acknowledgement for something that's working. Now you can tell us what's not working again and tell us something new about what's not working.
Yes.
But anyway, I just want to say a little positivity goes a long way.
A long way. And that's going to be key in our advocacy training later. We're going to talk about that. And on the IPM commission, it's the same thing. In the write-up, which I don't think, Stephanie, it's probably quoting you in a lot of ways. We talk about the importance of bringing in some positivity, just to reach out and make that connection, because we all feel good when people acknowledge that we're doing something right. So thank you for saying that again. I think it cannot be said enough. So it's acknowledging people for what they are doing and not just what needs to be done, what's lacking.
Yeah, and honestly, look, we're working on complicated issues here. What we're talking about, all environmental issues are complicated, making change is complicated. So these things take a while. And so when you sign up for this stuff, you're committing to be in it for the long haul. And so that's, let's develop a partnership and stroke each other and keep each other fired up so that we can get through what sometimes can seem like a long while. But, Marin County really does a good job. When we get out the other end of a process,
Yeah.
We do a very good job. I really believe that.
I can say that from my own experience too, because don't let this discourage anybody, but my project for the environmental forum, when I went through, was finished 4.5 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
and it needs more help now. I mean, that's the crazy part of all this. It still needs more help. So
yeah, it's very common. So don't lose heart, everybody. You're right in the mix. Let's keep going.
yes. Wonderful. Yeah. Thumbs up. It'll be Rosie's and Superman. And anyway. Okay. So it looks like we're about finished here. It's been really great. And so we do have a fourth poll. Leslie, if we could bring up that fourth poll, and then we have another question that we'd love to get some responses in the chat. Or you know what, you can also, I think you probably all know how to contact me. I think if not, we'll be sure to send that out, and please send it later, and we'll keep this going. We'll keep this conversation going, because that's what it is. It's a conversation. That's what I'm hearing in terms of what Stephanie, Lorenzo, and Nancy are saying. So yeah, let's go ahead and complete the poll if you could, please. Did you learn any new tips today that you plan to try out? Okay. Any more response? There we go. We're still coming in. Give it a moment here. Okay. All right, I think we've got it here. Let's go ahead and publish those results if we could. Looks like yes. Okay, that's good. At least we have some of you who have learned something and want to try it out. And then for those of you who aren't so sure, but no problem, we'll help you take care of that. And then you're not so sure that things will make a difference. All right, well, that's helpful to know too. Now what I'd love to do is either here in the chat, or if you could, we're interested in what did you learn today that you do plan to try out when you're working on your advocacy communication to an elected or appointed official? Anything you could put in that chat. And if you would prefer, go ahead and unmute and say it. We could do that too. Anything in particular that stood out for you?
Well, I liked the comment about having something positive in your presentation or your ask or whatever it is, because personally, I know if someone bombards me with just complaints and negativity, I kind of shut down and defenses come up, and it isn't very collaborative. And so just from my own personal feelings about that, what was stated confirmed what I already thought. And I also, in Toastmasters, when you're giving feedback to someone, they talk about sandwiching. So you say something positive, then you give a constructive criticism, and then you follow up with something positive. I find that really beneficial to keeping the lines of communication open, and I can see how it would work in this as well. And I also liked, Stephanie, your reminder that you guys are human beings. Like, I think sometimes those that feeling gets lost about someone in what maybe is perceived as a higher power isn't looked at as just another human being. And it's a good reminder.
That's great. Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing that. And let's see, what do we have here? We have Karen, build relationships to advocate for an issue. Leslie, Amber, positive reinforcement. Absolutely, kind of echoing what you just said, Anna. Leslie, include acknowledgement, organize comments from your group or individuals to each present a different point. And we'll be getting more into that again later. I'm sorry I keep repeating myself. Anyway, but we will. You're going to be hearing a lot of the same things. Susan Holloway, these were great presentations. I learned it's better to just pick up the phone and speak to a human being rather than signing a petition. Yeah, those are so impersonal, and maybe they do have a place. I'll tell a story about that too at some point. Building relationships with supervisors and aides. Yes, Lorenzo's story about how not being heard or seen as a 12-year-old when he summoned up the courage to go to the city county office was rebuffed. Yeah, that's so sad. It's just heartbreaking. And thank you for sharing that, Lorenzo. And you know what? If that hadn't happened, we might not have you here today. So I'm not saying everything is for the best. It isn't always. But anyway, I'm glad we have you here today. And then what else? We appreciated how accessible, welcoming our speakers are. I feel encouraged, big contrast to Lorenzo's experience as a 6th grader. Yeah, great. Okay, and then Tamala gave us more information about next forum. Okay, I think we are ready to turn it in. I just want to remind you all that you have the write-up that's kind of an ongoing, it's iterative. The handout, there was one Word document I asked you to read today, in addition to going to a meeting if you had not already attended one or presented at one. And so if you would take a look at that, and then what I'll probably be doing is adding a lot of what we heard today so that we'll have this even more comments. And if you learn something in your travels with advocacy communication, please do not hesitate to email us, or we'll make this a collaborative document also, because it helps people to hear the same things again and again and again. At least I'll say it does for me. Maybe you don't need that, but I need the constant hearing it and reminding myself, especially when I'm really upset about something that I just want to go pound on somebody's desk. So, all right, it was lovely being with all of you. I can't wait to see many of you again. And again, special thanks to our wonderful speakers for giving their time. We were very lucky that today wasn't a regular Board of Supervisors meeting, because they're usually on Tuesdays, right? And we wouldn't have had Nancy and Lorenzo. Stephanie, I think we would have had you, but you know, anyway. So thank you. And you're all welcome back anytime we're talking about things. Okay, bye everybody. Thank you.